Hey guys, so today we are going to be learning about the carbon cycle by That High School Tutor. So this is going to be like a series of videos wherever I teach all four biochemical cycles. So what are the four main biochemical cycles? They have water, carbon, nitrogen, and oxygen. But as the first slide stated, we're going to be talking about carbon. Now, something important to mention about carbon is that, as we know before, carbon is the backbone of life. Every single thing that is living has carbon in it, which is something to remember. So, what is the carbon cycle? So, basically, the carbon cycle is just the cycling of carbon in the biosphere and in ecosystems. So, it's nature's way of recycling carbon. I have a picture here to demonstrate the main overview of the carbon cycle. So the main factors in the carbon cycle is photosynthesis and cellular respiration because they both contribute to intaking carbon dioxide and releasing carbon dioxide. So let's break down these steps. So we have four main steps in the carbon cycle. We have photosynthesis, decomposition, respiration, and combustion. As you can see, I've color-coded it for a reason. So, the top two you see, photosynthesis and decomposition, is what we call carbon capture. This is what takes in carbon from the atmosphere and keeps it within their system. Now, there must be a way to release it. So, respiration and combustion is what we call as carbon release, wherever we release the carbon that has been stored in photosynthesis and decomposition. So let's talk about carbon capture. I have a diagram here for you that we'll be using in our future slides as well. So let's talk about photosynthesis. So as we know, photosynthesis is how organisms like plants, maybe even like small bacteria, or what we call autotrophs and producers, how they make their energy, how they make their food. So photosynthesis is taking carbon dioxide from the air and converting it into glucose. So as we see here in the carbon dioxide cycle, we start off with carbon dioxide in the atmosphere. And as we go down, the next stop is photosynthesis. In this, as a product, oxygen is released for animals to inhale or for other organisms to use as energy, which we will see later. And the second part of the carbon cycle is decomposition. It's whenever the oxygen from the photosynthesis is used by other organisms in the ecosystem, such as as we see here, we have a lamb, okay, maybe even a squirrel. They use the oxygen from photosynthesis, and as a result, they store carbon in their bones and stuff like that. So, as I said before, carbon is in everything that's living. So, once these trees die, once this lamb dies, there's still carbon in their cells. So, that is what we call as decomposition, whenever the carbon from the dead remains get turned into the ground or soil. And actually, eventually, what happens is that the remains of these dead organisms turn into fossil fuels and sediments that also carry carbon in it because of the organisms that were dead before. What we call this decaying of organisms into fossil fuels is what we call biochemical conversion, as we see here. So let's just run through carbon capture one more time. We start off with carbon dioxide in the atmosphere, which gets translated into photosynthesis, which uses the carbon dioxide to produce oxygen. And whenever the organism, like a tree, dies, it gets turned into fossil fuels, or it decomposes with the help of bacteria and fungi and all that stuff, obviously. Same thing with animals, except they use the oxygen from the autotrophs to get their energy. And whenever they die, their remains become fossil fuels and waste products as well. So what's the second part? Carbon release. I have a picture here again. So there's one main part of carbon release that we talked about earlier is cellular respiration. So as a recap, animals or organisms perform cellular respiration wherever oxygen is used to turn food into energy. And as a product, carbon dioxide is released back into this cycle, as we see here in here. Animal respiration. The lamb has used the oxygen from photosynthesis and now is doing cellular respiration. As a product, carbon dioxide is released back into the atmosphere, which can be used again in this cycle as well. And then we have combustion, which is how humans add, besides like breathing out carbon dioxide, it's how we made factories to add carbon dioxide into the atmosphere by burning these fossil fuels from decomposition. As I said before, the fuels came from the sedimentation in the ground and from dead organisms. So we have arrows from the dead organisms and we have arrows from the fossil fuels going into our auto and factory emissions. This is where you see these little things that bring carbon dioxide back into the cycle. So there are other ways that these carbon dioxide can be released back into the cycle, as well as there are other ways that carbon dioxide can be put into the cycle. So, for example, it doesn't have to be just these small steps. Like, you could also have erosion happening. Maybe this water here is breaking down at the sediment and is releasing carbon dioxide. Is releasing like solid carbon within its sedimentation. As erosion happens, carbon is released into the environment. But another way combustion can happen is through, like, say there was a volcano. If a volcano is active, it releases carbon dioxide. And that's maybe another way that carbon dioxide can be released back into the cycle. So as you can see, this cycle is continuous. It keeps going on and on and on. As I said before, the cycle never ends and keeps recycling carbon throughout the cycle. But something that has happened over the past few years is that humans have contributed to an increase of carbon in the atmosphere, which leads to an increase of the greenhouse effect. If you want to learn more about the greenhouse effect, I have some links in the description that you can check out. So according to the US EPA, since 1970, carbon dioxide emissions have increased by about 90%, and that's a lot. We've been contributing to the greenhouse effect, making resources limited and making biodiversity less. So most of this comes from, like before, the combustion stage of the carbon cycle, with our factories, with our inventions and stuff like that. But the more carbon we produce, the more we decrease the stability of our environment, and the more we use up natural resources, like limestone and like coal that came from sedimentation and decomposition. But humans have been doing a lot to make our system more eco-friendly and make things electric, etc., etc. So we are making steps to making our environment a safe place for us. So that is all for the carbon cycle. If you have any questions, please pop them in the comment section. And yeah. So that's basically all. Except there's one more thing I want to share with you, is that carbon must be recycled from other living organisms. It can be there like already. Like, all the carbon that is in the environment has been recycled. It has been through many, many organisms and many, many like parts of our environment. Yep, so this is the carbon cycle. Like I said before, if you have any questions, please pop them in the comments. So, yeah. Bye!